we have done, what are we doing, and just going through everything. Interviewing student athletes, trying to get as full a picture as we can if there is any more to the picture. And as part of that process, I know I did receive some inquiries on, what does Iowa do in terms of drug testing? And so what I thought I would do is give you some background. I also have here, I'm looking around the audience, somewhere here is Dr. Del Miller. Where's Del at? Del is a psychiatrist at the University of Iowa. He has worked with us in the past on evaluating drug tests, and more recently we've hired him as an outside consultant to manage our drug testing program. But let me go back and just give you some context. As Kirk mentioned in his comments, there's multiple levels of testing. The NCAA tests, and they generally test, they do test on campus. They generally come here once or twice a year, and all campuses. And then they test at every championship site, or most championship sites. So that's one level of testing. The second level of testing comes through the Big Ten Conference. A few years back, as athletic directors, we agreed and gave the Big Ten the ability to go and start testing our student athletes on our campuses. So that's the second level. And then finally, the third level. I mentioned it began in 1988. We are not mandated by the NCAA or anybody else to conduct drug tests on our campus. There's no requirement. It's something we choose to do. And we do it for some of the reasons that Kirk mentioned. We spend about $70,000 a year to manage that program. And I'm going to go through in just a minute here, sort of how it works. But the goal of our drug testing on our campus is education, making sure that our student athletes are aware of the dangers, certainly deterrence. I mean, we'd like to have it in place so that it would deter behavior, poor decision making, but also then trying to get ahead of something. If we learn of a positive drug test through our own drug testing, we go through our student athlete code of conduct, but immediately we can engage that student athlete in counseling. And we can begin to go through a process to hopefully catch it before it becomes a bigger issue or before it becomes a legal issue. So that's the goal of our on-campus drug testing. Again, it's not mandated. It's something we do to try to be proactive. I mentioned that Dr. Del Miller is here, and he'd be able to answer questions about how we go about it. But roughly what we do, Del oversees the program for us. We hire an administrator who does the actual testing. That administrator hires medical students, pharmacy students on our campus to actually collect the samples. The samples are then sent to an outside testing agency, and then those tests come back and Dr. Miller and the administrator evaluate. Dr. Miller sees the test with no names attached, and the only time the name becomes attached, or if it comes to the athletic department, is if it's a positive drug test. So that's how our departmental policy works. As I mentioned, so after last week, one of the things we wanted to do is just go back and look at everything. Look at how we do it, how often we do it. This is something we do with all student athletes, not just football. It's something that we do all year long, not just certain weeks of the year. And through those three tests, virtually every student athlete at some point during the year gets tested. We average, I think Del told me, somewhere between 800 and 900 tests a year ago, and we have roughly 700 student athletes. So you can see the numbers that we go about and test. One of the things we did last week is go back and just make sure that our testing the protocols, the procedures were all in line. We did learn that there were some flaws and some inconsistencies. Now, we didn't catch anybody cheating on the test. I'm not at all concerned in following up that there's somehow a staff member that's involved in some sort of inappropriate behavior or cover-up. But we did find that pretty strong evidence that there are a couple of ways that our student athletes probably have and most likely have at some point gotten around the test in some way. That's something that every drug testing situation, it's almost become a cottage industry around the country. How do you beat a test? How do you beat a test? And it's something that we have to be constantly on top of. So working with Del, we made sure that, again, all of our protocols, all of our procedures are appropriate, and